Hey everyone, thanks for having me today. As Elaine said, I left school when I was 12, so I've been designing my life for a while. And my path has been circuitous. I ended up going to college and dropping out and starting a gap year program. And I want to walk through that path today a little bit and share some of the insights that we've learned from running a program focused on experiential learning and self-directed education. And hopefully some of those things will be useful for you, whether you're in school or have kids or are a lifelong learner yourself. So unschooling, what does that actually mean? I came to my parents when I was 12 and I said, I'm really frustrated with this school system. And I grew up in a very small farm town. It was a place where what was valued was being on the sports team, not academics. And so it quickly became clear that if I was someone who really wanted to get an education, I would have to take that into my own hands. It was impractical to go to a private school. Only one of my parents had a job. And so leaving school was the only obvious choice. And we were very lucky that there was a group of unschoolers that had a framework and vocabulary around this kind of education that my parents and I were trying to wrap our heads around. And so unschooling is basically an academic and self-directed form of homeschooling. It wasn't done for religious reasons. It was done because I wanted to get a real education. And so I was really lucky that from 12 to 18, I got to do things that I never would have been able to do in the classroom. I worked on political campaigns. I started my own businesses. I helped at the library in my hometown. And the world became my classroom. And despite all of that, despite having taken a very different path, I still had in my head that going to college was the way to validate that my learning in high school had been the right thing to do. I recall even justifying to my parents that unschooling and homeschooling would actually make me a more attractive applicant to colleges. And indeed, colleges look at homeschooled students as people who know how to manage their time and are more mature and know how to do their own research and really look for those students. But when I got to college, it became very clear that that was the wrong attitude and the wrong mindset. And there was something really hypocritical about having used this alternative method of education as a backdoor right back into the system. And so when I got to college, I was really frustrated with having so much of the experience of education taken away from me. Suddenly, someone else was telling me what to learn and evaluating what I was doing, and I just had to do the work. And that was a third of the work that I was used to doing. And in fact, most of the important stuff about how you learn is knowing what you need to learn, knowing what you don't know, and then learning how to evaluate it on the other side. Otherwise, you're just being told what to do and following through. And so I was the kind of person who spent a lot of time looking for the right school. I spent a lot of time looking at colleges and eventually chose a small liberal arts school because I thought that was a place where I could go and get a well-rounded education. That was something that I really valued. And what I found really frustrating was that my interests as a student were not aligned with the interests of the institution. There was an institution that was well-intentioned and meant well, but they were teaching us things that we could look up on Wikipedia. And that, to me, didn't feel like the purpose of education. It wasn't how I was used to learning. And I had very little control over the things I was learning. And I wasn't being asked practical questions. I was being asked to evaluate and write papers in a bubble without being asked why those things apply to my own life. There's some very basic things that we know about how your brain learns. And the number one thing is that you have to have personal context. And you have to care about what you're doing. And so if you're being asked to memorize Plato's philosophy without having context as to why it matters to you, then it may not even matter at all. So those were some of the reasons that I was really frustrated with school. And eventually, it got to the point that I dropped out. I feel like I gave it a good try. And it became really apparent to me as I was trying to push some things within the institution and change the system that I wasn't going to be able to mold the system to how I wanted it to be as I had been used to doing throughout middle school and high school. And I recall sitting in the cafeteria with a number of friends and acquaintances who I was in class with. And by this time, it was fairly publicly known that I was going to drop out. I started uncollege.org and been fairly vocal on campus about my frustration with the system. And they were, my friends were sitting down and asking, aren't you gonna miss all this stuff about the college campus? Aren't you gonna miss all the beer and the girls and parties and so on and so forth? And to be fair, the social experience of college is incredibly important. It's just a lot cheaper to go to Thailand for a year and get drunk there rather than stay stateside, if that's really what the purpose of college is. But I think moreover, they were sort of missing the point that the things that we typically associate happening on a college campus, interacting with professors and having mentors and living with a community of other learners, working in labs, those are things that happen off of a college campus too. And those are things that you can access if you just ask, but frequently people don't ask. So I ended up dropping out. I ended up becoming part of the first class of Thiel Fellows. And I ended up moving back to San Francisco, where I had found my people even before I'd gone to college. So when I was halfway through my senior year of high school, I ended up working at an education company called Zinch that later got acquired by Chegg. And in being part of the startup community, I found the closest thing as an adult to self-directed learning that I had as a kid, right? The key trait of being an entrepreneur is knowing and being able to figure out things that you don't know how to do. I like to think of myself as an expert at doing things that I've never done before. I can't say I have a lot of other skills, but I can do that one very well. And that's really one of the key things that you learn as an adult. Being able to take a problem, break it down, and solve, even when you don't have all of the information in front of you. So as I was dropping out of college, I was becoming more and more mouthy and talking to the press and telling people why the institutional system was going to rain down upon us, and ended up telling a reporter that I was writing a book, which at the time I had a one-page Word document with an outline sitting on my computer. And eventually, one day at the beginning of May, woke up to a bunch of emails from agents in New York to find that I'd been quoted saying that I was writing a book, and that a bunch of people wanted to see my manuscript, which did not exist. And so ended up selling a book to Penguin that summer and wrote Hacking Your Education. It essentially became a master's thesis in what are the skills that you need to learn to be successful as an adult, but no one ever bothers to teach you in school. So I interviewed about 100 people who had done interesting things with their lives, but without relying on formal education. They'd become entrepreneurs and doctors and architects and lawyers. Some of them went to college, some didn't, some went halfway. But the thing that they had in common was what they did professionally had little to do with what was in the class, with what they had been formally taught in the classroom. And I think you'd be surprised to find that most adults, aside from a few industries, don't actually work in what their undergrad degree was in. With academics, that's more common. But even in a group like this, I would bet that there are quite a few people who haven't gone on professionally to do what they studied in undergrad. So over the course of those 2 years, I was writing the book and sort of increasingly feeling like I wanted to do something where I could see the real tangible impact of the research that I'd done. And so we put up a landing page for a gap year program. We hadn't designed any of it, and said, if we think of these skills that my interviewees keep talking about, understanding how to communicate, how to build relationships with mentors, how to give and get feedback, are really key and critical. And they're meta-learning skills. They make you a better and more effective learner, agnostic of the subject that you're studying. And I started wondering why there wasn't an educational program that focused explicitly on teaching those skills, as opposed to teaching math or history or science or biology first. And so that's what we set out to do in the fall of 2013. And so we've built a curriculum and coaching model that specifically teaches how to negotiate, communicate, keep yourself motivated, advocate for yourself, give and get feedback, write emails, keep yourself on track, set your own goals. Skills that are incredibly effective and useful as an adult, but no one bothers to actually teach you in school. Building an educational program is obviously incredibly hard, and despite, no matter how motivated the students you have, no one wants to do the dishes in the dorm. But it's been really insightful to get to pass on the kind of knowledge that I learned as an unschooler to the next generation of young people who are taking the time to be really methodical and think about who they are and what they want to do and the choices that they want to make with their life. Most of our students do the program because they're smart and hardworking, and they're very intentional about what they want to do and that they want to go to school, but they see the high price tag, and they want to make sure that they take the time to understand how to make the most of their higher education experience and not waste it if they're going to take the time to go to school. There are three main insights that we've developed throughout the last 3 years as part of the coaching process that I want to share with you today that I think might be helpful as you continue in your own college careers. The first is that this idea of what you're passionate about is really overrated. We like to think very practically in terms of a Venn diagram where there's a set of things that you're good at and a set of things that make you money. And the intersection of where those things are is what you should focus on. I think there's been a trope that you should work on the thing that you're passionate about. And if you follow that line of logic, you'll never get started. One of the things that we have to do with our students is really challenge them to just start doing something. We get lots of students who come in and say, I really love dance and biology and something else. And getting them to move and take the first step to try out whatever that skill is often the hardest thing. And that doesn't mean that you have to go and work in a biology lab. That can be as simple as doing an informational interview, talking to someone, doing some reading and writing about what that job actually looks like. But getting our students to that first point of actually doing something can be the most challenging. We have a bias towards getting our students to be really incredibly practical about what it is that they want to do and what they want to learn. The last thing that we hear our students come back to us and say, that's one of the most valuable things that I took away from this experience, is the power of simply asking for what they want to do. I feel like one of the things that we're taught in school is that the world is full of barriers, and we aren't taught that if you ask for things, ask for help, ask for a mentoring relationship, ask for an internship, some sort of job experience. If you never ask, you don't know what the opportunities are. And we hear our students again and again coming back and saying, when I got to college, I really took that to heart. And because of that, I was able to go use the office hours and develop a friendship with a professor who got me an internship. And those are the kinds of things that we'd really like to see more of throughout higher education. It's been really amazing in the last 6 years to see just how much the conversation and dialogue has shifted as we think about what the ROI is on a college experience. 6 years ago, people thought I was crazy, and today I talk to college presidents who basically agree with what I have to say. And so to see that massive shift in perceptions and expectations is really incredible, and I think speaks a lot to the capacity that we have for changing the system as it is. When my dad went to a state college in California in the 1970s, tuition was a couple $100 a quarter, and now it's $13,000 at a UC. And so I think if things keep moving in the same direction that they have the last 6 years, over the next 5 and 10, we can eventually get back to a place where every young person will again have the opportunity to access an affordable and practical higher education. Thank you.